So can I refer members now to item number 5 on your agenda, the draft minutes? And they are on pages 260 to 268 of your meeting pack. Can I ask members, are they content that the draft minutes of the meeting of the 7th of August 2025 are a true reflection of proceedings? Content? Thank you, members. We move on to item 6, matters arising. There are no matters arising. Okay, thank you, members. And we're now going to move on to item 7, and that's the proposal for a directive as regards the digitalisation and common specifications, and it's departmental oral evidence. Members, items 7 and 8 on the agenda are oral evidence sessions with departmental officials on the 2 proposed EU acts which we have just received legal advice on. These proposals form a package of measures seeking to simplify and digitalise a number of existing EU product conformity assessments and reporting requirements. If members are content, we will hear the oral evidence on agenda items 7 and 8, the package of proposals together, and following this we will decide on whether to monitor each of the proposed. Yes, Steve?
Sorry, through the chair. No, it's just for a point of my own education. Is this a new branch or a new beginning of a branch, the Trade Windsor Framework branch? Is this new, or is this a new way of being, they've brought that up, or have I just missed that beforehand? Because I think it's the first time I've seen any department actually have a proper Windsor Framework branch to involve with trade. Is it a new branch, or is it a new sort of scope, or have I missed that?
I'm not aware.
I'm sure it would be for the officials.
Unfortunately, Mark, who's the head of branch, he's unable to make it now. I think it's a new branch.
Yeah, just for our own education. Yeah. It's the first time I've actually seen any sort of Northern Ireland sort of department actually have a proper Windsor Framework branch aligned to the Windsor Framework. So that's progress. Well done. Somebody's done it, but it's the first time I've seen it.
I think Mark's he's kind of our go-to guy, and he's been given an increased portfolio. So I asked him yesterday for his title, which was head of branch for Trade Windsor Framework branch.
So we've got a name now.
It's got a name. Yeah, it's got a branch.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Damien, for that. Can I refer members to the relevant papers at pages 7 to 158 of your meeting pack for the proposed directive, and pages 159 to 258 of the meeting pack for the proposed regulation? Can I remind members that as part of its consideration of the proposed EU acts, and in order to inform a decision on whether to monitor each of them, the committee agreed to request departmental assessments of impact and invited officials to give oral evidence. The assessments of impact from the Department for the Economy can be found at pages 153 to 254 respectively. Can I remind members that in line with agreed processes, departmental officials were provided with questions in advance to be answered as part of the oral evidence sessions, and the questions can be found at page 12 of the meeting pack. Officials were also asked to share their responses in writing before the meeting, and these have just been emailed to members this morning. You may have received them, and they are available in hard copy. So can I welcome Damien Doherty, Chief Inspector of Trading Standards with the Department for Economy, and can I welcome Kevin Neeson, the Deputy Chief Executive of Market Compliance and Operations Division from the Health and Safety Executive NI. And we just have apologies there from Mark, as Damien has mentioned, who is the Trade Windsor Framework Branch Department for the Economy. So can I ask the officials if you are okay to proceed with your presentation?
Yeah, go through with my oral briefing. Good morning. I am Damien Doherty, the Chief Inspector of the Trade and Standards Service, which is part of the Department for the Economy. Unfortunately, I'm not joined today by Mark McGregor, who's head of Trade and Windsor Framework Branch. Unfortunately, can't make it. And also Kevin Neeson, who's the Deputy Chief Inspector of the Health and Safety Executive, Northern Ireland. Thank you for inviting us to provide information on the EU proposal being considered by the committee. I will be leading the evidence on behalf of the Department for the Economy and will provide members with a brief overview before opening to your questions. For ease, I will refer to proposal for directive of the European Parliament and of the Council amending directives 2014 EC, 2011-65 EU, 2013-53 EU, 2014-29 EU, 2014-30 EU, 2014-31 EU, 2014-32 EU, 2014-33 EU, 2014-34 EU, 2014-35 EU, 2014-53 EU, 2014-68 EU, and 2014-90 EU of the European Parliament and of the Council as regards digitalisation and common specifications, and be referred to as the proposal. So normally policy colleagues from the Department for the Economy would be sitting in my chair and leading our evidence today, but various circumstances mean that they're unable to join us. I would like to recognise that they have supported the background work that enables today's briefing. So at the outset, I would like to reiterate the comments within the explanatory memorandum on devolved competence, which states that product safety regulation is primarily reserved, though some aspects of conformity assessment and required documentation may relate to devolved policy areas. This means that the subject matter expertise for the areas under consideration mainly sit with the Office of Product Safety and Standards and or other UK government departments. So the Secretary of State for the Department for Business and Trade is responsible for the UK's overarching product safety and conformity assessment policy, as well as the coordination of the UK's market surveillance and enforcement policy. The Secretary of State for the Department for Transport is responsible for recreational craft, marine equipment and transportable pressure equipment. The Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs has responsibility for batteries, tests and chemicals, certain hazardous substances and pollutants and resource efficiency policy, in as much as it contributes to the minimisation of waste and protection of the natural environment. However, for most of the products within scope of the proposal, Northern Ireland's interest is normally limited to enforcement responsibility across a number of Northern Ireland departments and local authorities, rather than policy competence. This means that for the most product areas, we are acting as a conduit between the committee and the UK government policy leads. We greatly appreciate the support of colleagues in the Department for Business and Trade and the Office of Product Safety and Standards in coordinating the diverse input required to inform members. So moving on to the substance of the proposal, I would draw members' attention to the products within scope. So the first proposal covers equipment for use outdoors, electrical and electronic equipment, recreational craft and personal watercraft, simple pressure vessels, electromagnetic compatibility, non-automatic weighing instruments, measuring instruments, lifts and safety components for lifts, equipment and protective systems intended for use in potentially explosive atmospheres, electrical equipment designed for use within certain voltage limits, radio equipment, pressure equipment and marine equipment. So this proposal seeks to simplify reporting requirements and reduce administrative burdens for businesses and market surveillance authorities by mandating the use of digital formats for declarations of conformity and similar documents, which must be accessible by internet address or machine-readable code, and requiring that manufacturers indicate a digital contact on products placed on the market, by specifying that instructions accompanying products may be provided in electronic form, with the exception of safety information, which continues to require a paper format, and amending reporting requirements to national authorities that require a paper or electronic format to an electronic format only, introducing an obligation for digital communication to national authorities, and introducing a provision allowing common specifications as an alternative to harmonised standards where these are unavailable or insufficient. And finally, obligating that information contained in declarations of conformity and instructions is available on a digital product passport where a digital product passport is required by other EU legislation. The digitalisation proposals represent a package of measures concerning the simplification of reporting requirements and regulatory procedures. The objective of this is to remove numerous paper-based obligations, transition to digital equivalents, and contribute to the digitalisation of economic operators' obligations and business-to-authority reporting. This is to be achieved through the amendments to the directives mentioned earlier. Another development in the proposal is the introduction of common specifications. So common specifications are a set of technical requirements detailing how products should comply with regulations, which are issued by the European Commission and can be adopted when harmonised standards are delayed, unavailable or insufficient. So currently businesses typically demonstrate product conformity through harmonised standards, which are developed by standardisation bodies and referenced in EU legislation. It's worth explaining that harmonised standard is a European standard developed recognised by one of three European standards organisations: CEN, which is the European Committee for Standardisation; CENELEC, the European Electrotechnical Committee for Standardisation; or ETSI, the European Telecommunications Standards Institute. It is created following a request from the European Commission to one of these organisations. So manufacturers, other economic operators or conformity assessment bodies can use harmonised standards to demonstrate that products, services or processes comply with relevant EU legislation. So manufacturers must follow the specifications or show that they at least have adopted solutions of a level in safety and performance that is least equivalent. To allow market actors to adopt new specifications, there's a transition period in which their use is voluntary. Where such harmonised standards do not exist, economic operators often have to resort to complex and costly third-party conformity assessments. In terms of conformity assessment, a manufacturer can only place a product on the market when it meets all the applicable essential requirements. The conformity assessment procedure is carried out before the product can be sold, and the European Commission's main objective is to help ensure that unsafe or otherwise non-compliant products do not find their way to the EU market. The proposal therefore introduces common specifications as a legally binding fallback option, adopted directly by the Commission to fill gaps where harmonised standards are unavailable. The new common specifications aim to provide an alternative, uniform framework for demonstrating conformity across relevant product legislation and reduce costs and delays associated with conformity assessments. This measure aims to streamline market access and reduce legal uncertainty, particularly benefiting manufacturers of innovative or niche products without existing harmonised standards. So initial assessment of the impact analysis undertaken by the Department for Business and Trade has found that the proposed amendments will not have significant impacts for those selling goods into Northern Ireland, as the overarching aim of these amendments is to streamline the provision of information for regulatory compliance purposes. Rather, the proposed amendments may have a positive impact for those trading in goods by reducing administrative burdens while providing a reasonable timeframe to familiarise with new requirements. The EU's impact assessment notes that the changes are limited and targeted and do not have significant impact on policy. However, DBT notes that the proposals for digitalisation have the potential to introduce a difference in approach for products between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. It also acknowledges the potential for initial costs relating to the transition to the new regulations. DBT has stated that it recognises the value of streamlining, which will be looking to engage further with industry and consumer organisations in the UK regarding similar measures for Great Britain in due course. The evidence available therefore points to the potential for some initial costs relating to the introduction of the new requirements and for a difference in approach compared to Great Britain. This situation would persist until such times as similar measures would be adopted in Great Britain, something that the UK government has undertaken to consider. The DBT analysis does not indicate that any of the impacts are expected to be significant. Conversely, Northern Ireland companies seeking to trade with the EU would have to comply with the requirements being proposed. Not applying the proposed Replacement Act would cause a significant impact, namely a barrier to trade with the EU, and this impact would persist for as long as the requirements applying in Northern Ireland continue to differ from those applied by the EU. So thank you for your time today, and we are happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Damien.
Chair, just I'm
Yes.
conscious that members agreed to take the evidence on both of these two proposals together. Perhaps maybe officials would just want to confirm if there's anything they want to add in relation to the regulation, maybe just
well, as I say,
essentially
it was going to be covering the same issue. I suppose just they merge the two together. There's obviously there's a directive and a regulation. The proposal for a regulation of the European Parliament of the Council amending regulations EU number 765/2008, EU 2016/424, EU 2016/425, EU 2016/426, EU 2023/1230, EU 2023/1542, and EU 2024/1781 is the second proposal in the regulation, and that covers products within scope or cableway installations, personal protective equipment, appliances, burning gaseous fuels. So everything I've said in relation to the directive applies equally to the regulation.
Thank you. We have Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much. There's a lot. There's a lot of areas. I'm constantly thinking of the huge issues many in our manufacturing sector have in accessing products free flowing from GB, and some of the particulars that are mentioned here, I know direct examples where businesses have faced increased costs in doing business in those fields with regards to customs, etc., and bureaucracy. So, on the face of things, I can understand how a digitalised process would streamline and help businesses overall. I understand that theory, but in practice, if the same did not apply with GB, we would further entrench some of the difficulties that our businesses are facing in accessing some of those product lines in GB. That's my understanding on the face of things. Would you agree with that? I'll go on to complement that in a moment.
I would say so. It adds additional burdens onto businesses. As I say, unfortunately, in terms of the number of products here, they're within the directives and the regulations, measuring instruments and non-automatic weighing instruments fall to trading standards. All the other products fall out with. I can only speak for our own industry. I've had meetings with the UK Weighing Federation, which is a trade body for weighing instruments in the UK. They have said yes, it will create additional burdens for them. They are supportive of digitalisation. Yeah. They see Northern Ireland as too big a market, not to. They won't be pulling out of Northern Ireland. They will, I suppose, absorb the additional burdens. They'll get on with it, and effectively what they have said is they will be pushing for the UK government to introduce similar provisions and measures within GB to ease that flow.
Yeah, and I see you've mentioned that, and that being used through the likes of the Product Regulation and Metrology Bill, but sometimes what they say and what they do don't really match up, and we've seen that continually at this committee. I know many businesses, particularly here when we're talking about construction, that their supply chains are deeply rooted with that wider sort of UK network in terms of construction products. So if we see a case where the UK don't follow, those supply chains would again potentially face increased costs. And my fear, as it is always when studying these things, that when we look at Northern Ireland as a subsection of their overall scale of business, it's very easy for those in GB to turn the face away from Northern Ireland. So I think that is something that I will want to keep a watching brief. You did actually mention that some but not all UK products still require physical documentation. Do you want to maybe fill that out for me about how that looks, for example? So there is a bulk that are online digital and some that aren't. How is that structured at the moment, and how would without detail, I'm just trying to get myself around the concept.
Maybe if I input into that. So this proposal applies to a number of directives and a number of types of products. So I suppose to give you a flavour of some of the products that still require physical hard copies of documentation, some would fall under the low voltage directive, and there are other products as well, but and that would be for things like declaration of conformity. But obviously this proposal in terms of safety instructions, it still requires physical copies for safety information.
Okay, that's helpful. So in a nutshell, if Northern Ireland adopts this digitalisation through this regulation and GB doesn't follow, those companies that are still on the physical documentation will not be able to supply the Northern Ireland market with their product unless it is in compliance with the digitalisation. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. They basically have to operate a dual regime, so they will have to, if the proposals are adopted in Northern Ireland, for those requirements to provide the digital information, that's what will have to be provided for any trade in Northern Ireland. For GB, if there's still that paper-based requirement, then they will have to operate. So in terms of your first question, I think we need to go back to the Department of Business and Trade to find out, because of the breadth of the products in scope here, to find out which are paper-based. As I say, for my own weighing and measuring instruments, they are still paper-based, so there would be a departure in terms of moving that to digital. So you could have economic operators trading in the Northern Ireland who would have to require to provide the information electronically and provide that in paper-based copy in GB until such time. But I suppose we can come back to the committee on further information about
and
the
I
products.
appreciate the detail and the candid discussion, but for the points that I've raised, unless I've seen a UK-wide approach adopted, there is no way that I could support a regulation which essentially would put more pressure on supply chains from GB and potentially cut some product lines off from the consumers in Northern Ireland. So thank you, and I appreciate more information as it comes.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. It's interesting that a lot of this is based on the fact of, so at the moment there's mutual recognition between the standards between the United Kingdom and sort of the EU, but we're now moving beyond that stage and the difference of the standards that come through. So even if the standards diverge even further and the UK's standards system and checking the standards of the system is no longer seen to be compliant with the EU, even if they have the regulatory framework and have the different paperwork and all the rest of it, that would mean that GB goods coming into Northern Ireland in these particular areas wouldn't be able to come here, would they? Because they don't comply with the EU standardisation.
I suppose if they want to trade into Northern Ireland, they will have to comply with the EU rules, which will mean they will have to take measures to ensure that they're meeting all the requirements, essential requirements, and meeting the standards for trading into the Northern Ireland and subsequently the EU market. If they choose not to do that, then they won't be able to put their products in the Northern Ireland because they won't meet the EU requirements of these proposals.
Just for clarification, if it's only going to be used in Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom, and I'm particularly referring to a lot of buildings and building projects that are built into ISO standards that are set by the UK, they will have to be compliant with GB standardisation and measuring instruments and realisation and all the rest of it, because otherwise it won't meet the ISO standards and the other standards for building, manufacturing and building in Northern Ireland.
Again, construction products and buildings outside my area of expertise. You probably need to speak to, again, we can take that back and check it up with.
It's a bit fundamental, because what we're doing is we build stuff in Northern Ireland because we're part of the United Kingdom to the United Kingdom standards, and to do that we have to use all the tools and materials that are the same standards that are agreed by sort of the UK sort of bodies. But if there is this divergence that is occurring, and we know it is occurring, we're in a situation where GB won't be able to supply that particular things to Northern Ireland, then we won't be able to build construction to the same standards as we're part of the UK.
It depends on what standards adopted. Currently, most products are made to EU harmonised standards or to normative documents or to ISO standards.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
So those ISO are international standards, and in my profession we use OIML, which is the Organisation of International Legal Metrology Documents, where there isn't a standard, there are those normative documents where people can assess and make sure their products conform to all the essential requirements. So there is provision in place, essentially the common specifications. It appears to be a parallel system to the EU harmonised standard. There is some discontent from industry who have responded to the EU.
And a bit, to be honest, sort of Chair, I've had it approached to be on some specifics. I don't want to go into the specifics here because I barely understand them because they're quite technical. But there is a real issue beginning to develop, because they can't build construction projects to the standards within the UK framework here because of what the rules and regulations are now being said about sort of the future measure. I really don't know but there are some real significant issues, and the technocrats are really worried about it.
Essentially, the possibility for divergence will create two regimes, and fundamentally that can create issues for businesses. As I say, any specific questions about construction products or the building industry, as I say, we'd have to take those away and get people who have the expertise and the technical expertise to answer. Unfortunately, Kevin or I can't do that within the...
Chair, I'm not preempting where we'll get to when we have the discussion of this, but if we do decide to look further at this, maybe this is an area we could look at as part of the committee. But sorry, I'm not preempting anything at this stage.
Thanks, Steve. Any further questions from members? No further questions, so can I thank both Damien and Kevin for your presentation today on behalf of the committee, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks.
That whole construction sector,
Hold on. That's just
moving into.
Can I just advise members and a decision to monitor will be taken on each individual act now, is that okay?
sorry, through Chair, I didn't want to preempt it, that's why I
No, that's
said
fine.
I'm
No,
just saving
that's-
that
yeah.
yeah.
So can I ask members, do members wish to monitor the progress of the proposed directive as it progresses through the EU legislative system?
I would propose yes.
I think that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. And secondly, can I ask members, do they wish to monitor the progress of the proposed regulation as it progresses through the EU legislative system?
I propose.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Unanimous, yeah, thank you. And can I also then seek agreement to request that for both the proposed directive and the proposed regulation, that the Department for Economy provides a revised assessment or assessments of impact if any changes to the text are proposed by the Council of the EU or the European Parliament, which would have a significant impact specific to everyday life of communities here in a way that is liable to persist. And then secondly, that RAISE is asked to monitor the progress of the proposal and submit quarterly updates to the committee. And members should note that the DFC can decide to hold an inquiry at any time into any proposed replacement act that it is monitoring. So is he content with that? And then additionally, Steve, you had...
And again, through the chair, one of the issues is that, because we're in Northern Ireland, of course, the building regulations sit within the Department of Finance, which are also germane to these discussions and sort of ISO standards. And I think the Department of Infrastructure have got something to do with it. It might be just more than the Department of Economy.
Right.
So in terms of committee process and next steps, as part of our request that we now submit for the written answers that you'll have received before the meeting, we note that if there are questions such as those that officials can't follow up on in the room, they're requested to come back to us in writing on that. As a first step, are you content that we follow that process and then look at what we receive back in writing on those specific questions, including your own, Steve, and we can then look to see if there are other avenues of inquiry that we would need to do off the back of that?
It's just through the chair, and because for my sins I sit in the finance committee and know the sort of all that sort of stuff that goes on in the background. Just as a more than a heads up, because once it gets into specific building regulations and there's a whole plethora of stuff that sits out there in procurement and the rest of it, I think it might, maybe our committee might be giving them a heads up that, you know, there are issues that are involved with this that might be useful as well at this stage, because I think this is going to gather a momentum and we'll rapidly run out of one department dealing with it. But that's only a proposal. I'm not going to down the ditch about it, but that's what I was thinking.
Sorry, specifically, what are you proposing?
I'm proposing that we also ask the same questions that we're asking the Department of Economy to look at as well, to look at the Department of Finance, in specific the building regulations. I'm not sure how much infrastructure have got to do with it, but I know Finance have got building regulations on their plate, so it's just another thing that, you know, is likely to come out.
Okay, so procedurally after the meeting, we'll be following up with the Department for the Economy to let them know decision to monitor and all of that, and we'd be asking them to come back on those specific questions. If we just ask them to liaise and secure input from the Department of Finance as well.
Through the chair, I do think it's probably important. Well, I would imagine it's happening, but surely these, if they don't fall under a particular department's force, they would happily know where it does fit to enable the information flow from finance or infrastructure or whatever. So I would imagine that's being done, is it not already?
Yes, we know, for example, that is happening with liaison with UK counterparts, but as part of the process of requesting an assessment of impact, TEO does a round the houses of interested departments. So look, we as I say, on all of these matters, when there are questions to be followed up on, the ask is to come back to us. We can make, if members are content, we just ask that they liaise with other departments as appropriate.
I'm not being obtuse, and some people here know I can be as obtuse as anybody, but I'm not being obtuse at this one. But it's because of the peculiarity of where building regulations lie, and you know, unless the Department of Finance does lots of things, but I can tell you right now, building regulations isn't the top of the sort of the permanent secretary's concerns at the moment. So maybe a heads up that might be part of the process might be useful, but that's all I'm saying.
Oh no, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I think
I'm honestly don't know where it sits
you,
with the Department of Infrastructure, so that's I only talking about what I know is the Department of Finance. Yeah.
So you can content to include that within DFE when we go back to DFE in the response, that for them to look into that, and obviously you've raised it as well with Damien, so they're made aware as well.
Yeah, we'll just say in their follow-up to consult with any other departments as needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure, can
Yes,
I-
Jonathan?
Not a different point. When was this just received this morning?
Yes.
Well, it is very helpful, as I've always said. I think it's a really good structure. Can we just again please reiterate to departments this would be useful to have before the morning of the meeting, where possible.
So our agreed process at the minute
To provide it before the committee.
is yes, and noting the sort of constraints on departments,
Yeah.
the process that we have agreed at the minute is look before the meeting starts and noting that officials will talk through it.
Yeah.
So it's there as a supplement to the presentation. If you're content, we'll add it before as early as possible,
Yeah.
but noting that there's sort of practical constraints there.
Yeah, no, and I accept that. It seems that the departments are actually becoming more organised in their ability to structure this, like as Steve has mentioned, even having a specific branch.
Yeah.
So I don't see why this potentially couldn't come earlier, because it's helpful. It's a helpful read-on whenever you're assessing what's said from a presentation. So just maybe re-emphasise that point, that this coming a wee bit earlier would be certainly very helpful to members.
Fine, Jonathan. So we're content, we will move on to item number 9. So it is the proposal for a regulation on the safety of toys and repealing directive, and it's consideration of the survey responses. And can I refer members to the relevant papers at pages 273 to 296 of the meeting pack. Members, you'll be aware that this proposal has not been notified to the committee. It began its EU legislative passage before the committee was established, and we agreed to gather evidence on the proposal in anticipation of a likely notification once published. A provisional agreement was reached between Parliament and Council in relation to this proposal in April, and the provisionally agreed text became available in June. The text now awaits formal adoption, which is tentatively expected to be completed in November, after which the text will be published in the official journal of the EU. In June, I wrote to the First and Deputy First Minister to reinstate the committee's long-held position that it expects to be told by relevant departments whether or not a replacement act will have an impact as far as a minister's official responsibilities are concerned, regardless of whether the policy is reserved, and ask for that information to be provided in this instance. The committee also wrote to the British Government requesting that the Office for Product Safety and Standards responds to a series of questions on the proposal which had previously been issued to Solace, and asking whether the officials could attend a meeting of the committee to provide oral evidence. Responses from both the First and Deputy First Minister and from the British Government are still awaited. So following the publication of the provisionally agreed text in June, the committee launched the citizen space consultation with a 4-week deadline for response, and also requested that Solace and legal services provided updated assessments of the proposal. So the updated legal advice can be found at pages 277, and an update from Solace can be found at page 290 of your meeting pack. The committee received no responses via Citizen Space. However, an emailed response from the British Toy and Hobby Association can be found at pages 292. A response from the Health and Safety Executive is also included at pages 295. It states that it is not an enforcing authority and that the regulations are the responsibility of the local councils. So we will return to consider this proposal again once responses are received from the First and Deputy First Minister and from the British Government. So just in the meantime, could I ask members, are they content to forward the response from the British Toy and Hobby Association and from the Health and Safety Executive to the British Government? Yeah.
Great.
Would members also be content to publish the responses from the British Toy and Hobby Association and from the Health and Safety Executive on its webpage, having been reformatted and redacted in order to remove any personal information and improve readability on the website? Is members content? Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want? Yes, Peter.
Is it okay? Are we finished yet, Chair? Do you want to?
Yeah, well, if no, that came now before we move on.
Is that
yeah?
okay, Chair? I appreciate that. I just 2 points regarding this. One is point 2 from page 273, and it's maybe something we can look at, but it did catch my eye. The second bullet point says extending existing obligations on manufacturers to ensure that a toy does not present a health risk, which might be quite obvious. but also to cover the psychological, mental health, well-being and cognitive development of children, and essentially the risk that toys pose in those areas. I'm wondering whether or not there's anything from the EU that, like a form of an explanatory memorandum or something that gives some context to what they're talking about. I did have a look through the internet there in terms of trying to find something, so I wonder, is there anything we could find that explains what the directive might be talking about?
So I would have to go back and consult our original legal advice on it. I suspect that there might have been some discussion of it at that time.
Right.
I don't, off the top of my head, recall what that discussion looked like.
No.
So it might be a case that we have a look back at papers we've already received and see if it's within that. Are you content if we note that we look at that the next time?
Absolutely fine, Chris. No, I'm not asking for it now, but I'm just interested in what they're talking about, because that caught my eye. And the only other thing there, Chair, really is, perhaps we could write out to the Executive Office again along the same lines as you have, and just say, look, are you going to respond, or when will you respond, along the lines that you've already written to them on?
Well, I'm sure, yes, we could just do a follow
Right,
up to say
follow-up.
when we expect to receive, even
Absolutely.
if that's okay.
Chair, perhaps add to that, maybe just why is there a delay in it? Is there something happening that we aren't able to pick up?
Yeah.
So the Secretariat checked for updates on both of the responses we're waiting on. First and Deputy First Minister's private office just says that it's still under consideration at this point. The response that we're waiting from the UK Government, we understand that Cabinet Office is still waiting on some input from the OPSS. So we, as a Secretariat, have checked in with both of their offices just for updates ahead of this meeting.
Okay.
Are you content that just maybe in advance of the next meeting we do the same again?
Yes, no, that would be fine if it's been recent. Yeah.
Bob, just on that particular issue there, Chair, in terms of the OPSS...
Yeah, Chair, can I just say, just let you know I'm going to head on. You asked me to let you know when we'll have to leave now. Sorry to interrupt, Peter.
No bother. Thank you, David.
Nobody else go.
Apologies, Chair. Just on the OPSS thing, Chris, perhaps we might also consider writing to Cabinet Office to see what the issue with OPSS is, and try and push them along, because obviously they're an important stakeholder in all this. So I don't know, Chair, if you're happy enough that we do write to Cabinet Office and try and, maybe not compel, but perhaps encourage OPSS to engage with the committee on this issue.
So the members have agreed that we'll be sharing our consultation response with British Government anyway. Okay. As part of that, we'll note that we still await a response, and the committee has agreed to like it as soon as possible, or something to that effect.
Just if it's noted that that's important in terms of their engagement, Chair, from OPSS, that's fine. Okay.
Peter, are you content?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on then to the next item of business, which is the proposal for a regulation establishing the Union Customs Code and the European Union's Customs Authority, and its consideration of the survey responses. And can I refer members to pages 298 to 332 of your meeting pack? Members, this proposal has not been notified to the committee. As with the previous proposal, it began through the EU legislative passage before the committee was established, and we agreed to gather evidence on the proposal in anticipation of a likely notification once published. Just to advise members, the trilogues between the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union on this proposal are currently ongoing, and formal adoption and publication is not currently expected until 2026. Members, on the 29th of May, the committee heard legal advice and oral evidence and agreed to launch the citizen space consultation with a 4-week deadline for response. And RAISE is also monitoring the progress of the proposed EU Act. Members, just to update you that there has been 3 responses that were received from the Consumer Council, the British Port Association and the British International Freight Association, and these can be found at pages 325 to 332 of your pack. Just like to inform members that written answers from the Department and HMRC and an additional response to the committee's supplementary questions can be found at pages 316 and 321 respectively. So I'd just like to ask members, are you content to ask the Department for the Economy to provide a revised assessment of impact, including input from HMRC as appropriate? If any changes to the text are proposed by the Council or the Parliament which would have a significant impact to specific everyday life of communities here in a way that is liable to persist. Are you content with that? Yeah. Are you also, in addition, members content to request that in any revised assessment of impact or in its assessment of the published Act, the Department includes comments on the consultation responses we have received, updates where appropriate on its previous answers to questions posed by the committee, and a summary of any input received from trade bodies through the Department and HMRC's engagement? Content? And just finally, and I'll let Jonathan ask members, are they content to publish the responses on its webpage, having been reformatted and redacted in order to remove personal information and improve readability on the website? So members are content, yeah. Jonathan, yes?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The issue of customs declarations and barriers on the RSC is something that is still getting worse. You know, we at the, just for the reference for the committee, yesterday at the Economy Committee, we received correspondence from the Road Haulage Association who want to come to give a briefing to the committee on the challenges that they face. So it may be useful on the back of that to help fill some of the information and context for some of the issues that they face. You know, they're facing an international style border on the RSC, which is disrupting some of their business flows, whether it's with some of the GB supply chains, but also costs and declarations. To add more to that and simply embed it will further add that pressure. So I think we really need to be alive to this situation, but I would want to know how the committee can, for example, we're starting to see it at Economy, and I'm sure maybe other committees will see it, whether it's infrastructure, where a lot of these organisations that are specific sector focused will come to those specific committees to give evidence. How can we ensure that that evidence is reflected in our deliberations here at the committee for those members that, for example, aren't on the specific committee?
So how we as a committee would consider evidence, say, that's given to Economy Committee or whoever else it might be. I think in the first instance, we can, in the specific answer that you give, we can maybe contact the committee and ask for, I'm not sure in practical terms what it is you envisage here.
To expand on what I've said, it was mentioned, and Emma was there as well, it was mentioned by some other committee members that they didn't want to duplicate the work of the committee. Yeah. But the committee's remit is very tight. So therefore, they were fearful that, and thankfully they are, because these people do need to have their case heard. But they were afraid of, well, what's the duplication? Is the Windsor Framework Committee the appropriate committee for the RH to give evidence on in relation to the challenges that they face on the framework, or is it the particular committee? And I would just want a bit of guidance on that, because I'm happy to deal with them here at the Windsor Framework Committee, but equally when it's sector specific, you know, committees can't turn them away. But there's a realisation that they don't want to duplicate the work. So I'm just trying to work out in my own head how that works in practice, so that we can assist other members whenever we're talking to them at particular committees.
Sure. Well, so the split in terms of remit between the committees is relatively clear. That as a proposed EU Act, it sort of sits within our bailiwick as a proposed replacement EU Act, and that remit sits with us up until the end of the scrutiny period after it has been published. Yeah. Anything that falls after that is for the relevant statutory committees, and you'll see for a number of correspondence that we get that we have an agreed process on taking that approach to say this now sits outside of us, and we pass it on. More generally, on examples such as this one, at the minute we ask RAIS to identify who it may be that is an affected stakeholder in relation to a proposed replacement act, and consult them on a very specific set of questions that relate to our remit. So that's to say that stat committees may want to take evidence on a wider set of issues than what we do, and we contact them based on the questions that affect our role. We could ask that the clerks forward the Hansard of the session you
That would probably be the
you refer to,
because you can get a situation where, like for example, the Road Haulage Association, where their presentation might fall in between in what you're talking about. So some of the presentation may be about what has come before, done and dusted, therefore this committee can't really go back on it. But some of the issues such as this, what we're dealing with today, they may go on to talk about that because it falls over both, something that's coming and something that has come. So I just wanted to understand how we could help with our other colleagues and our other committees to ensure that, yes, they give adequate scrutiny to these particular issues, but also that we're not duplicating it.
So, just to summarise, then, it's kind of clear that the best way to deal with that, Jonathan, is through RAISE and highlighting it.
So yes,
Whilst highlighting it to RAISE, that they're ensuring that any evidence that would come to any of the committees, just to flag it, they probably do it anyway, but to flag it that that way be included in relation to their ongoing monitoring of
my
the
understanding, if Chris, you can direct me, is that if an individual committee has a request for a presentation on issues, it's up to that individual committee whether or not they listen to it or not. But for the Windsor Framework Committee, it's whether or not it's a current ongoing regulation that's under consideration or in future for consideration. Am I right on that?
Yeah.
Yes. So we look at proposed and published acts that sit within our remit. If you're content and if members are content in the specific example that you give, we ask the clerk of the committee to forward the Hansard of that session for consideration.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Steve.
Sorry,
yes.
Chair. Mine's probably a slightly more substantial point, and I'm not saying that yours wasn't, Jonathan. The Uniform Customs Code is going to fundamentally change everything that's been done so far. The Windsor Framework and the Protocol were based on the previous Customs Code. This is an entirely new Customs Code, and it has much broader scope and remit. To a degree, I don't think people really understand how different it is likely to be. But if anybody's been following sort of EU Politico or anything like that, there's considerable disquiet within the EU about where the Customs Code's going and the areas it's doing, because it fundamentally changes how everybody across Europe does business and will fundamentally affect Northern Ireland in ways that hasn't been anticipated either through the Protocol of the Windsor Framework. Aiden's our voice and is our outpost in Brussels. I would probably quite like, earlier rather than later, an output from Aiden, his sense on the ground of what's happening with the Union Customs Code. Because one of the things we've got to really understand is how different this is going to be. Because industry is already picking up how different it is. You're talking about an entirely new border, but they're also talking about new IT systems. They're talking about new trusted trader schemes. They're talking about a whole raft of different things, and they're also looking at different product classifications. So a lot of the discussions that were based on the Windsor Framework and the Protocol were based on were on existing product classifications. Those aren't likely to be in place when this goes through. So I think I would sort of request that we receive a formal brief from Aiden about what's his view on what's going on. It's not a political one. I just want to understand the landscape of what is likely to happen and how it's changing, because I think this is probably the most significant thing we're going to have to deal with, for the next 3 to 4 years.
Members content? Yeah.
Makes sense.
And when you say formal briefing, do you mean written or
I would really,
whatever.
I'm not either advocating additional expense or anything, but I would like to speak to Aidan and his team face to face and get a sense of what's going on, because this is the biggie.
Through the chair, we did pick up some of that when we were in Brussels at our last visit. There was a specific briefing on this issue around the Union Code, so it was useful. I'm not sure what the format is, but I'm happy enough to hear more.
Could that be facilitated and maybe quicker than later by bringing Aidan and other officials in online?
We just need to speak. However it is, I think sort of through the chair, we need to speak to him.
Yes.
Sure. Just on that, obviously in terms of the citizen space responses, there's been a range of views. British Freight Association taking one, the British Ports Association taking another, and the Consumer Council coming right down the middle on that one.
Sounds like Northern Ireland.
It does a wee bit, doesn't it? So, given, and I completely agree with my colleagues here, the significance of this, and I don't want to create precedence in terms of the committee, so I'll be steered by yourself and the clerks. Is there if we're inviting Aidan in to give us a bit of a briefing, would it be worth at least saying to these respondents, who will obviously be very, very pivotal in how this works out, whether they'd want to come to committee and give some evidence? I know obviously there's some evidence in writing, but would they want to present in front of the committee on this issue?
I suppose on the first point, with regards to Aidan, I think just in the question, I think it would be really useful to do it as soon as that is viably possible.
Yeah.
So ideally, if that could be accommodated,
Yeah.
so it means we can be more knowledgeable of the breadth of maybe the changes that exist. So is that okay? That the Secretariat can touch base and with Aidan, and if it's either in person or possibly online, you can work through that and get back to the committee on that.
Just through the chair, I mean, we've got the budget. If necessary, we can fly him in. I mean, because he could be doing a lot more stuff here as well, talking to other people. So, yeah. Did I hear somebody go, when I said mention budget, we're going?
Well, I'll leave it to Chris and the team, sure, that you
Brilliant.
can liaise
Yeah,
and see
thanks.
what's best, obviously, regarding his diary and ourselves and see. The second proposal regarding inviting in, I'm just conscious of times and stuff, and obviously it is pertinent. We have written correspondence at this stage. Just I'll pass that over to yourself, Chris, just obviously with regarding the...
Yeah, it would be a matter for members to consider when they think the most useful timing would be on that. I'm conscious that the trilogues process might change the shape of this process and will take a long time. It might be that closer to the end of that process or after that has completed would be more useful.
More useful.
Yeah.
Absolutely fine with that. Let's revisit it closer to the time of the end of the trilogues.
Yep.
Happy enough, yep.
Right,
Yep.
okay. Yes, thank you, Peter. So if you are content enough, we'll move on now to item number 11, and it's committee work planning. And can I refer members to pages 334 to 337 of the meeting pack for an update on the committee's work planning exercises? So just members, as you're well aware, back in September 2024 and then in February 2025, work planning exercises were carried out to identify proposed new and replacement EU acts which had started their legislative passage before the committee was established. So your table on pages 334 to 337 details the work undertaken in the most recent work planning exercise. The most recent update from the Executive Office can also be found at page 338 to 339 of the meeting pack. Many of these proposals have already been considered by the committee, and the evidence gathered is set out in the table. Following on from the completion of the previous work planning exercise, it is proposed that 2 further assessments of impact are requested, and these are on 1, the proposal of a regulation on the production and marketing of plant reproductive material in the Union. And second one is the proposal for a regulation on the production and marketing of forest reproductive material. Can I ask members, are they content to request these assessments of impact? Yeah.
I'm content.
Yeah. Can I also advise members that following receipt of the assessments, further steps can be considered? Are members content to note the updates?
Yeah. Just let me resize my screen so I can actually see it. Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
yes,
in that
thank
case,
you,
yeah.
members.
Declan can read faster than I can.
And members, now we'll just move on to item number 12, which is correspondence. So item 12.1 at page 345 of the meeting pack is correspondence from the Speaker enclosing a copy of the findings of the independent review of the Windsor framework. The Speaker has also shared the correspondence with all members of the Assembly. According to Schedule 6A of the 1998 Act, the Secretary of State must publish a written response to the recommendations in the report within 6 months of receiving it, which could be January the 9th at the latest. So Schedule 6A also states that this must contain information about the Secretary of State's response to any representations made about the report by the Assembly. We can therefore take some time to consider how, as we as a committee may wish to respond to the review, and I would propose that in the first instance, the Secretariat is asked to prepare briefings on the procedural matters arising from the recommendations for the committee. Yeah. And then we're also waiting a number of responses which may prove relevant to those briefings, including some which we have discussed under previous items on the agenda, such as responses from the First and Deputy First Minister and the British Government in relation to the proposed regulation on the safety of toys. The reviews report includes correspondence from the committee which highlighted that proposal in particular as an example of the challenges the committee had faced in gathering information on reserved matters. It may prove useful to factor those awaited responses into our considerations as well, just in order to take a more comprehensive view of how we might wish to respond to the recommendations. So at this stage, are members content to note the correspondence at this stage and to ask the Secretariat to prepare briefings on the procedural matters arising from the review's recommendations for the committee? Steve, yes?
Yeah, just a couple of ones. Obviously, and I guess that was something I was going to bring from AOB. There's a lot of good detail in Lord Murphy's report, and I think stepping aside from our sort of ideological positions on the Windsor framework, one side or another, but actually there's a lot of really good stuff in there about procedures and making sure we've managed to meet the deadlines and things we do. I just wonder if it'd be useful for the committee to take outside a normal committee session, or maybe a working group or an afternoon for us to actually go, subject to the work of the Secretariat, to actually sit and go through and look at the modalities of the bits and pieces and how we do business and the rest of it, and is there anything we can add to it? Because I think there's a lot of things we can agree to on the process and procedures, keeping the ideology piece way out there, but there's a lot of really good work in there that we could build on and look at to do that as well. But I think it would have more weight if we all had the opportunity to sit together and come to a collective response on it, because I think there's a lot of things collectively we could agree on.
You want on the same similar point, yes, Jonathan?
No, look, content with the proposed approach. Like, it goes without saying, like, I was extremely let down by the review in itself. I think it was a bit of a whitewash. No harm to the author. Yes, he had an envelope or a dangerous position to try to balance, but tinkers around the edges of democratic deficit. It does nothing on the fundamentals, which are causing huge trade disruption and divergence. Yes, references some of the procedural elements and how it could help, which in fairness will help the functioning of this committee in terms of the scrutiny and the processes. But overall, it's a complete missed opportunity, in my opinion, to deal with the substance. So, just for the record.
Jonathan and Peter?
Thank you very much. Chair, yeah, just page 16 of the report. Again, Lord Murphy had a fairly unenviable task, I would imagine, but to highlight one thing in terms of what my colleague just said, he therefore recommends, in terms of the democratic scrutiny mechanisms, that the UK government continues to work with all Northern Ireland parties, ensuring that there's transparency about the function of the brake and related mechanisms. It should also go further to acknowledge the impacts EU legislation is having on Northern Ireland and where it has acted to address these concerns. That's not a particularly measurable statement or recommendation. I'm sure the government will say it's doing all it can, but it doesn't act. There's nothing specific in it that's measurable, and that recommendation in itself, what's being very optimistic, it's immeasurable and it has no intent. So again, I concur with my colleague that whilst Lord Murphy, I believe, did his honest best around it, I think the report is a massively missed opportunity, certainly from my perspective.
Thank you, Peter. To summarise then, the proposal would be to, obviously, the Secretariat will go away and do the research. Okay, Jonathan.
Is it okay for members?
And you would propose, and I think it may be useful as well to have a separate meeting outside of, for us, the collective, if members were happy enough, in relation to once the papers are prepared. We'll have a separate organisation. A meeting. Is there any particular? I suppose we could deal with that near the end. Is there any particular
near the end,
date or times or whatever that would suit?
Sure. Yeah. So look, in the first instance, if the Secretary goes away and prepares those briefings, and as a part of that agreed action, we agree that we will discuss those briefings in a sort of informal setting as a committee.
Yes.
I'll be one.
Okay. Thank you. So we can move on then to item 12.2, and it's at page 390 of your meeting pack, and it contains written answers from the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs on a proposed regulation regarding certain market rules and sectoral support measures in the wine sector, which the committee is monitoring. Are members content at this stage to note?
No, yep, happy.
Yeah, okay. Item 12.3, it's at page 345 of your meeting pack, is a response from the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs on a proposed regulation on the welfare of dogs and cats. The committee had inquired about the interaction between this proposal, which the committee is currently monitoring, and the department's animal welfare pathway. Are members content to note?
Chair, first a declaration of interest and B, a statement. Declaration of interest is somebody who owns a dog and is owned by 2 cats. Some of the vets have raised issues about concerns about this as well, so I think this is something that we probably need to keep a closer scrutiny on as it goes through.
Yep.
And some of the specific things about licensing, tagging, chipping, and some of the rules of veterinary medicines. Again, it's an area that's well outside my area of expertise. Apart from taking the dog for a walk at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm not really much sure about that. But I've been contacted by various vets who have raised their concerns because I'm on the Windsor Framework Committee, so it's just something we just need to keep an eye on,
Yeah.
I would suggest.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve, for highlighting that. Yeah. Are we content then? We'll move on now to item 12.4, and it's at page 398 of the meeting pack, and it's a response from the Cabinet Office on the proposed EU regulation on plants obtained by certain genomic techniques. Are members content to note?
No.
Thank you, members. Item number 12.5 at page 401 of the meeting pack is a response from the Cabinet Office regarding a proposed EU regulation on compulsory licensing for crisis management. The Parliament and Council reached a provisional agreement on the proposal back there in June. At present, the British Government anticipates that part of the proposed EU Act will fall within the scope of Article 13.3 of the Windsor Framework and would therefore be notified to the committee. However, based on the provisionally agreed text, it is not clear what practical effect, if any, those amendments to existing legislation under Annex 2 would have here. So therefore, if members are content, are we content to request an assessment of impact on this proposal?
I don't understand it.
Well,
Don't
thank
understand
you.
what he's talking about at all.
And just move on then to item 12.6, and that's at page 403 of the meeting pack, and it's a response from the Cabinet Office regarding the proposed SPS agreement with the EU. Are members content to note? Yeah.
Just sort of the chair, it was obviously that the government had trailed this significantly. It was going to answer a lot of the problems. And then Nick then said on Farming Today, it's one of the things about getting up with a dog that early. I do actually listen to Farming Today every morning. And they actually said there was no likely to be there would be unlikely to be an agreement until 2027, with no indication that it would likely to be enforced until beyond that, which is potentially 2028. So I just think it's important that the committee note that previously we've been told the SPS was going to answer a lot of the problems. It's not going to answer the problems anytime soon, and I think it's important we're cognisant of that. Okay.
Thank you, Steve. And then we'll now move on to items 12.7 and 12.8, which are both relate to the European Committee of the Regions and the UK Contact Group. So item 12.7 at pages 406 of the meeting pack is correspondence from the EU Affairs Manager on the matter. And item 12.8 at page 415 is correspondence from the NI Local Government Association, NILGA. So NILGA has requested to meet with the committee to discuss the Assembly's possible participation in the European Committee of the Regions UK Contact Group, with a view to jointly hosting a meeting of the group in 2026. The EU Affairs Manager has outlined that the work of the contact group may at times be relevant to the committee, but it also extends beyond our work and will be of interest to other committees as well as the Assembly more widely. So the Assembly and Executive Review Committee is currently reviewing the arrangements for Assembly members' participation in interparliamentary and international bodies, and may therefore wish to consider the Assembly's participation in the contact group as part of that. However, that work may not be completed until later in the mandate. Assembly officials could engage further with the contact group secretariat if necessary in advance of the Assembly and Executive Review Committee completing its work, and without prejudice to the outcome of that review, in order to explore how this committee might participate in the contact group and what would be involved in jointly hosting a meeting of the group in 2026. So at this stage I was asking members, would members be content to draw the letter from NILGA to the attention of both the Assembly and Executive Review Committee and the Speaker, and to advise NILGA on the basis outlined by the EU Affairs Manager? And I'll let Steve in now then.
Yeah, it's one for Owen. Stuart's still on that committee, isn't he? The Committee of the Regions.
Yes,
Could we contact Stuart Dixon and ask his opinion as well as what we're proposing? Because he's our representative on the European Council of Regional
something.
yeah. But Stuart's very heavily involved and sits on a lot of the committees on it, so he would be a good point of reference if this would be appropriate. You know, we've got somebody sitting there, we better have, might as well get his opinion on it. If you're happy.
I can double check, but I think that's a different body with a very similar name to this one. I will double check that, but
I'll ask his opinion anyhow, because he knows all that alphabet soup of European stuff anyhow. So.
Okay, so he's content at this stage then. Obviously there is an ongoing review. I suppose we need to be conscious that other committees may actually benefit from participation on it.
Yeah.
So in between times we would still be keen for maybe the Secretariat to follow up with the group in relation to what could be involved in jointly hosting it, etc. Okay, so all members are content?
Yep.
All right, that's great, thank you. So let's move on to item 12.9 at page 417 of the meeting pack, which is correspondence from the Allied Customs Services regarding the duty waiver reimbursement scheme under the Windsor framework. So in line with the committee's agreed approach, members may wish to forward the request to the relevant statutory committee and advise this organisation accordingly, noting that the Democratic Scrutiny Committee's statutory functions relate only to the examination and consideration of new EU acts and replacement EU acts. Are members content to forward that correspondence to the Committee for the Economy and advise the correspondent accordingly?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, members. So we'll just move on now to item 12.10 to 12.16, and that's at pages 419 to 444 of their meeting pack. And these are raised quarterly status updates on proposed EU acts, which the committee is either monitoring following a notification or has been gathering evidence on it and in anticipation of a notification on the published EU act. Are members content to note each of the updates and publish them on the relevant committee web pages? Yes, Steve?
Clarification, Karen. Because we're not a statutory committee, do you get to sit on all the committee's steering group? The only reason I'm asking
the chair
yeah.
group, yes.
Right,
yes.
good, okay. Because the one reason raising this is because RAISE has been exceptional in producing information and the rest of it, but one of the things that comes from Lord Murphy's report very clearly is resources, and we don't have enough resources. I just wonder if, because RAISE is doing so much good work, can we ask the question whether we've got sufficient support for RAISE as we go ahead? Because I can anticipate in not too long they're going to get swamped by a lot of the stuff that's coming through. So just through your role on the liaisons committee, can you sort of make sure that we're getting sufficient resources coming in our direction to RAISE, so RAISE aren't getting swamped out, particularly with this?
Well, I think we can definitely, yes.
Yeah.
We could even send an email from the committee maybe to the chair to ensure that it's
I'd be very content with that.
So it's really just it's forecasting the resource implications.
Yeah, because I know that there's a certain person who lives down the corridor there who's looking very closely at sort of budgets and stuff like that, and I would particularly want to make sure that RAISE aren't getting hit.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. At the next meeting I can raise it, and if we could even send an email as well. Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you. Just checking where we are now. We're moving on to item 12.17 at pages 445 of the meeting pack, and it's a copy of the correspondence from the British Government to the House of Lords NI Scrutiny Committee regarding the recent summit with the EU and the Joint Committee meeting. At our meeting in August, the committee received a copy of the separate correspondence from the British Government to the House of Commons NI Affairs Committee, which referred to this letter. The committee therefore agreed to follow up and request a copy of this letter for completeness. Are members content to note?
Yeah, great.
Thank you, members. So item 12.18 at pages 451 of the meeting pack is a copy of the correspondence from the British Government to the House of Lords NI Scrutiny Committee regarding the EU Critical Raw Materials Act. Are members content to note?
Content.
Okay, thank you, members. Item number 13, chairperson's business, which there is none. Is there any, item number 14, any other business? Yes, Steve?
Sorry, apologies, I didn't raise it before in the chair, but it was only as it was coming through. One of the things I've been contacted by, as you may be aware, that they're rebuilding the IT systems in the building, and particularly going behind the scenes on the website, and also looking at AI and its approach to data gathering and the rest of it. One of the major concerns is how do we get access to the European information when it comes through, and particularly when it's published in the European Journal. I was approached by somebody who's very, very good, but one of the things I said to them was it might be useful if you have the opportunity to go and talk to Aidan and actually go and have a chat with the Estonians or the Norwegians, because they have actually AI systems that strip stuff off the European Journal that are specific that might help this assembly. So I've just wondered, and again it might be a resource issue, but I don't think it'd be a large resource issue, if we could contact the Commission or whoever's doing the IT rebuild work, if we can arrange for them to reach out to the right people in Brussels so that they've got that level of understanding. There's no point in sort of trying to recreate a system that already exists.
I suppose it's something we can maybe write to the Commission on to see was that explored or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's because, and through the chair, it's basically because nobody really understands it. But as our visits to Brussels have shown, there are people there who do this because they do it using AI systems and the rest of it. If we could use part of that of our system, it would make members much easier to be able to understand all the
Do you have any
regulations.
detailed information yourself on what system you're talking about? Because obviously we're well aware we've all through the whole IT review and
a case, sort of my Norwegian and Estonian's not very good, but basically it's an AI stripping system that looks at the European Journal, comes through, identifies things that are germane to Norway and Estonia, highlights them, and then gives them to their relative authorities. But it's an IT system, it's a commercial IT system. But if we had the same thing, it would mean one of the things that Lord Murphy said, that our general level of understanding on all things EU is fairly low, as is most of Northern Ireland. So having something like that was within the Assembly would be, I think, would be quite useful. But it's just a proposal.
is it something that you would actually write to the Assembly Commission on to see if is that something that was
that's
explored or could be explored?
I'd love it to come from the committee, and I'm more than happy to write myself, but I would love it to come from the committee. I think it would have more oomph.
If I can maybe come in, work is already ongoing looking at Windsor framework issues specifically, and one of the things is drawing information directly from Eurlex, from the official journal, and how that can be processed smoothly. Obviously the committee works on the basis of notifications, but then there's a link there as well. So IT are looking at that sort of thing and looking how things can be moved quite smoothly from notifications, and then how that is all tracked. So that is part of the modernisation project.
It's just that the conversation I was having is that they were trying to invent a new system, and my view was, well, there is already a system there.
I suppose for this committee has very specific structures in terms of what it's asked to do and asked to track. So while, yes, there are already systems in terms of the law itself and the proposals, what the DSC has to do is quite unique as well. So it's also to address that.
At the moment. So maybe if Lord Murphy's recommendations get taken through, we might have a slightly broader remit.
Look, maybe in the first instance, we've agreed already that we're going to come back on Lord Murphy's review and talk about sort of procedural briefings for the committee in the round. I suspect that might be an opportunity to talk about some of this in that informal setting. As Jessica says, look, the IT team that are doing this modernisation process are looking at some of these things in the meantime. So maybe if we come back to that as part of those conversations.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And just item number 15, which is a date and time and place of our next meeting. So the next meeting has been scheduled for Thursday the 18th at 10 a.m. in room 30. The Ulster Farmers Union will attend to give oral evidence on a proposed EU Act on the protection of animals during transport. Are members content that some suggested questions or topics for questioning are sent to the Ulster Farmers Union by the Secretariat ahead of the session and to aid their preparation?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, members. So that's business complete, and the meeting is now adjourned. Just ask the Committee Secretary now to